Hello class, this is Mr. Houseneck, and the purpose of this video is to give you a short demonstration of how to dissect an earthworm. Before we get started by pinning the worm, I just want to show you some of the tools that you're going to be using for today's dissection. This actually is what we call a dissecting probe. You'll use this to essentially fold back the skin before you pin it. These are the dissecting pins. You'll see that some of these have kind of a T-shaped, and some of them just have a regular round head to them. Either one work perfectly fine. Of course, you have your forceps or tweezers, you have your scalpel, and you have your scissors. Now, the pan, if you will, that I have all my materials in here is what we call a dissecting pan, and it has a rubber bottom, so that's what enables me to stick these pins in there. As well as the probe. Please do not stick your scalpel or any other tool in your rubber mat other than the dissecting probe and your pins. So I think we're ready to get started here. What we'll do is I'm going to clear some of these tools out of my pan, give me more room to work, and I'm going to start by pinning the worm. Now you got to make sure that you pin this on the right side. As we talked earlier, you always want to make sure that you're looking at the dorsal side, which is the dark side, much darker than that of the ventral side. So you want to make sure it's essentially laying on its belly. So I always like to put my worms diagonally because some of them are pretty long and they don't fit this way. So I angle them to give me a little bit more space. So as I'm pinning this worm, notice that I'm making it nice and straight, and what I'm doing is I'm feeling with my fingers to make sure that I'm not feeling any bristles. I want to have a nice smooth feel all the way down the dorsal side. If you start to feel some bristles, then that means you're on the ventral side. So the ventral side is going to be lighter in color and it's going to have some bristles to it. We'll go all the way down near the opposite end. You don't have to go all the way to the tip, but near the posterior end you're going to put your other pin. Now you also notice that I angled my pin away, and that essentially helps you, gives you a little bit more space to work, plus it actually holds the skin down and the worm down a little bit better if you would put them straight up and down. So at this point I think we're ready to get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scalpel. You notice that this retracts, okay, so that when you're not using it, you know, it's tucked in there nice and safely so that we avoid you know, any accidental cuts. And while we're on the topic of safety, since we're talking about a tool that's very sharp like this, one thing that you cannot see me using here is safety goggles. And since we do have a fluid that is used as a preservative to keep the worm from essentially decaying, that fluid, you don't want to get it in your mouth or in your eyes. So we're going to wear safety goggles. I'm wearing mine right now. And you should use those as well during the lab. The preserving agent, you know, you'll most likely just get it on your fingers, and you can certainly wash your hands at the conclusion of the lab, and you'll be just fine. So let's start by making our initial incision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a small incision just behind what we call the cuff structure. Okay, this is the cuff structure. So I'm going to make my initial incision right there. Okay, and I'm going to start with my practice cut. You're going to get kind of two chances of this. The first day is kind of a practice day. The second day is a little bit more serious in that you're going to see you know, much more of the internal anatomy on day 2. So once I make my initial incision, I'm going to find that incision with my scissor tips, and I'm just going to gently put the scissor tips in, and I'm going to lift and cut. It's very important that you lift and cut, because if you continue to go down into the worm, what's going to happen is you're going to actually go down into the intestines, and that's not something you want to do because it's going to make one heck of a mess. So just kind of gently lift and cut, and maybe what I'll do here is I'll get a little too deep so you can kind of see the difference. So I'm going to get a little too deep here so you can kind of see what happens if you get too deep. Okay? So I made my cut. Now you will most likely cut all the way to the posterior end. I cut maybe 2 or 3 inches just to kind of demonstrate how this works. So what I do here is once I have my cut, I take my probe and I just move the skin to the side, and then just temporarily, and then with a dissecting pin I actually put it through the skin to hold the skin back, and then I do the same thing on the opposite side. You'll notice that I'm slanting my pins. Okay, slanting your pins actually holds the skin open better, plus it gives you some workspace and you can see the internal anatomy. So what I'm going to do is go about an inch down a little further. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing, pinning my worm. Okay, I'm just going to get a little further. This is probably the region that I got into the intestine, so you're going to see a big difference between this area here, okay, and when we go down here, you're going to see it all mangled up. Okay, you'll see a dark material. That's just the partially digested food that entered the digestive tract. So you can see here, pretty good job with the dissection here. I really didn't damage the intestine that much at all. But when I get down here, I got too deep and I really got into the intestinal wall there. So you want to avoid doing that. Now you can see certain parts of the worm here didn't really open up as quite nicely as you wanted it to. And that's because there's some connective tissue that's kind of holding the skin tight against the internal anatomy. So you want to break that. So we call that teasing. So you just take your dissecting probe and you run along the edge. You can see the skin kind of lay open, especially over here. And you see that flap of skin just kind of gradually open up, and the same here, you'll see it open up. And this just allows you to see the internal parts of the worm a little bit better. Okay, so this is a pretty good cut here, not so good here. So this is what you want to do, and this is what you want to avoid doing. So this is the practice run. Again, as I said, you'll probably continue all the way back to the posterior end when you do it. Okay, now on day 2, when you come in, you're actually going to be working to the anterior end. So I'm just going to quickly kind of show you. You're going to use the same motion, and you're going to go all the way to the anterior end. And again, lifting and cutting to avoid internal damage. And this part is kind of the cool part, because you see a lot of different parts that we talked about in class when we looked at that diagram of the earthworm. This is where you're going to see the gizzard and the hearts and the crop and some of the other structures that we talked about earlier in the day. And I do the same thing here. I go up about an inch, put my pin nice and slanted, use my dissecting probe, go to the other side, pin it, and then I want to tease my connective tissue. Just like so. Okay, and you'll see this black line here. That's the dorsal blood vessel. As we work our way up, we'll see some of those other structures that we talked about. So I go up another inch or so, pin it open, and again, break that connective tissue. You'll see the skin open up just like that. And then this gets into a lot of these organelles, or I'm sorry, these organs that we talked about earlier. And if you do a good job with your dissection, you'll be able to see a lot of these. So again, tease the connective tissue, and you're going to see a lot of things exposed at this point. Move this down so you can see it. I raise it up. You can see the dorsal blood vessel. You have the intestine. You have the gizzard and the crop. These are the seminal vesicles, or essentially the reproductive parts. You have the hearts. These are these little black kidney bean shaped structures. When you get into this area, you'll have the esophagus. Down probably a little further here, you would find the brain. So this is where you're going to get into the nitty gritty of the earthworm anatomy. So with that being said, I hope this gave you a little introduction to the earthworm, and I wish you the best of luck when you do it yourself tomorrow. Again, just be careful that you are taking your time, and please consult your unit packet for the procedure as you work through day 1 and into day 2. Enjoy your dissection.